know if you can see my screen or when you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen. Can everybody else see the screen? I will assume that everybody can, because it usually works that way. And now the recording is in progress. Thank you very much, Tidia, for doing that. And off we go.
Super, thanks, Sean. Well, I'm going to start with an image of two different sorts of um, military chariot, both of which hopefully will seem relevant to you, because we're going to look at two particular areas this evening. One in the north, as Sean mentioned, up in Anglesey, at a place called RAF Valley, and then on the tank ranges in the south at Castlemartin, southwest in Pembrokeshire. And that's if those that are interested in that sort of thing, that's a German tank, that's a Leopard tank, and that's one of the gate guards you've got there over in Castlemartin. And I thought, given I'm speaking to such an august Welsh organisation, I really need to emphasise a bit of Welshness or a bit of Welsh affiliation, seeing as I'm sitting here in King Alfred's capital of Wessex here in Winchester, and you couldn't really get more English. I thought I'm really going to need to at least emphasise that I do have one or two Welsh connections, not just that, as Sean has mentioned, that Wales is now part of my bailiwick within the Ministry of Defence, which I'm very pleased about. I did my undergraduate at the University of Wales at St David's University College, Lampeter. So I'm delighted to see Martin and Jennifer on the talk tonight, because Martin was my tutor actually at university, and he didn't put me off enough, so I've stayed in archaeology ever since. So you can either blame or thank Martin after this talk for enthusing me enough about archaeology to keep doing it. So you can see Lampeter top left, you probably recognise. I'm also now a visiting fellow at the University of Cardiff, so I'm keeping my toe in Welsh academia, although I'm certainly not an academic by any shape or form. And it was only fairly recently I discovered I've also played rugby for the oldest rugby team in Wales, which is Lampeter. St David's University College Lampeter played the first game of rugby against Llandovery College over 150 years ago. So that's one of my Welsh links. So I'm coming back to some of my archaeological roots, you might say. Now tonight I'm going to talk to you largely about two particular projects, but there's a huge amount of archaeological work that's going on all the time across the MOD estate, relating to discoveries, to field work, to conservation work, to recovery work if it needs to be done, and research as well. And this is, there are things all across the estate, from St Athan through to Carwent. There's relatively recent work done on the Roman site of Carwent, and a lot of work on the Nitro Hill propellant works to ensure that they're in better condition. Penally, I was chatting with Sean earlier on about the First World War trenches that are in the disposal process, but we're selling to we believe a good buyer, so they'll be looked after for the future. And then Toby Driver gave me permission to show this. This is some recent work at Sennybridge, which the Royal Commission has done, and then linked in with Wessex Archaeology. This is on the middle of the training area at Sennybridge. They've discovered pretty certainly a Roman marching camp. And you can see the geophysics is not wildly clear, but you can hopefully make out the lidars better pick out. You can see the edges of the marching camp coming around here. It is quite clear on the ground, and that's really nice from my point of view, because that's a continuity of military activity on the military training areas. We do see this across much of the military estate at places like Chew Green in Otterburn, where there are practice Roman marching camps. So they're practicing digging these entrenchments, and so it's military training going on there for 2,000 years plus. And it's just nice to see so much research that's going on, and we really do encourage research on the Ministry of Defence estate, because it's such a rich resource archaeologically, I think. Sean mentioned that one of the things I've been helping to run since 2011 is this thing called Operation Nightingale, and the two projects I'm going to be talking to you tonight feature very heavily within that. So if you're coming into this talk hoping for really the minutiae of archaeology and lots of plans and sections, you're probably not going to get that. You might end up being disappointed. I'm going to tell you about the role of archaeology, the work that's gone on these two sites, but also one of the other major focuses for this work, which is on well-being, and how archaeology can be incredibly beneficial, which is one of the reasons why I'm permitted to do this by my paymasters, because they can see how we're supporting some of the men and women of the current British Armed Forces and veterans as well. So the two projects I'm going to talk to you about on the MOD's estate in Wales are both related to this programme of Operation Nightingale. But this isn't the first Welsh related project that we've done from an Nightingale perspective, and I'll come and tell you about one off the estate in a minute. The key thing when we put these projects together are a number of elements you want to have. I'm not going to read off all these. If you want to look at them in your leisure afterwards, please do. I always look for a site that's in a beautiful location if we can. Hopefully somewhere you're going to find something. That can be a nice feature. It can be artifacts, but imagine doing, I know, 5 or 6 weeks on a Bronze Age linear ditch and you're finding nothing. I think that'd be quite emotional, even for archaeologists that have done it for long standing. A good story is important, the options to getting food and good accommodation, and then all the other elements to it, the sort of outreach, the working with museums, choreography, as I like to call it. You're having different engaging elements that you're bringing into the project, with bringing in experts and evening talks and things like that. But the most important of all, if you think of the Venn diagram with all those different bits and pieces, the key one in the middle, I think, is friendship. And that's one of the great things about archaeology, is camaraderie. I mean, it could be camaraderie of being in a miserable, cold location that's very wet and you're all sitting there moaning about the site director for not letting you get off site. And it's quite a bonding experience. But friendship, I think, is the key from what we've had in feedback from all the veterans that have taken part. And we monitor these projects pretty carefully and get feedback and information, and they're studied for against things like the Warwick-Edinburgh system for anxiety and depression that the NHS uses. So there are some statistics to back this up. This isn't just me on a whim thinking that archaeology is great for people. There are some statistics to back it up. We have worked with universities of Winchester and Solent as well with their Amphora guidelines on the sorts of things you need to put together for a wellbeing project. So those are the things we bear in mind. Off the estate, and the first time we really had a real Welsh focus on archaeology with our veterans was this site. And hopefully you wouldn't need to be hugely imaginative to believe that this is a Welsh related site. The big metal mythical creature on the left should be a big enough giveaway. This is the site of Mametz Wood on the Somme. And if those of you that know your military history at all, or have been into Cardiff Town Hall and seen that vile but incredible painting of the Battle of Mametz, we know this is a visceral part of the of Welsh military history, with the 38th Division attacked in the early days of the Battle of the Somme in 1916 and took huge casualties. Amongst its number, people like David Jones, who wrote the beautiful epic, in parenthesis, lyric poem, and then Siegfried Sassoon and Robert Graves, other poets involved in this particular divisional attack. Which was initially fairly unsuccessful, but has become a really big thing on Welsh battle honours and Welsh identity. In fact, if you go to the foothills around the Dragon in spring, you will find a load of daffodils, and they were, I don't know whether we were illegally, surreptitiously planted by the Royal Welsh some years ago, but every spring you get a load of daffodils now looking out over this part of the Battle of the Somme. And we took a series of Welsh younger soldiers who'd been into Afghanistan and Iraq, and had either been medically discharged or in the process of doing that. As part of their recovery process, we took them out there and did some archaeology with them. May seem incredibly incongruous taking people to a battlefield as part of a recovery process for traumatic experiences on a battlefield, but there is something about this archaeological process of mindfulness and concentration and discovery and camaraderie that works phenomenally well. So here's some of the Welsh soldiers that took part in our fieldwork on the Battle of the Somme, and they're all, as you can see, with Matt's t-shirt at the top, big rugby fans. It's something I just can't escape with Welsh people working on my digs. You know, still part of the psyche. And if you can provide an individual to help you with your excavation who is very well known to any Welsh rugby supporter, that makes it all the better. So here's some of my veterans underneath the Mametz Dragon with quite a well-known Welsh rugby player, Gareth Thomas. So that was our first experience of working as an Nightingale program with military personnel, and it was a phenomenal success. In fact, you can see the excavation results are still online. It was done for BBC Wales as part of their First War commemorative program. So we're going to start off on the two sites perspective at the Castlemartin ranges over in Pembrokeshire. And this is taken as a screen grab from the Ministry of Defence GIS. So all the kind of brightly coloured bits you can see on the map are bits of the Ministry of Defence estate. The MOD owns about 1% of the UK mainland, so it's got quite a bit of estate and some glorious archaeology. Castlemartin is in this little bit of the promontory, the southwest down here. Visually, it's spectacular. It's an incredible location. On the training area, there are 5 of these promontory forts sticking out into the sea, and they've all got various threats and challenges to them. And in fact, these are all monitored. They're all scheduled monuments. They're monitored every 5 years by independent archaeological contractors, just to check on the condition of them, and to see what are threats. The military threat is in fact really small. You'd think driving tanks over and nearby and firing artillery pieces and a lot of infantry attacks, it could be under a great deal of threat. But in fact, that's one of the smaller threats to the monuments on the estate. In this particular location, you're probably not surprised to hear that erosion is a far bigger challenge on these limestone cliffs. In part, you can see the blowhole here, and there are these land bridges that are forming. You've got the Green Bridge just to the north of this site, and there is a constantly eroding area of this landscape, which renders it quite a bit under threat. Now, the problem for us is that if this land bridge does break through, it cuts off the promontory and renders future archaeological work really rather difficult. And it's a good site. So what we did as a team is we chatted through CADU with Louise Mees, and worked with the Royal Commission of Historic Monuments, in particular, Toby Driver and also Louise, to look at the potential for some limited field work at this place called the Castle at Buxpool, which is down as one of the standard Iron Age promontory forts in the region. In the Welsh academic agenda for looking at sites in the region, we don't know a huge amount about these in terms of dating and material from them. So this was another justification potentially for doing a small amount of field work. Louise gave us permission, subject to us initially doing a lot of geophysical survey around, and that was in part inspired by the Pembrokeshire chariot discovery that was outside the entranceways of one of these forts. I haven't got the results of the geophysics here, but it didn't show anything particularly exciting other than the ramparts and ditches, which are pretty clear anyway. So our proposal was to get permission for 2 areas that we were going to excavate over a couple of seasons, first of which was 2025, and the next one will hopefully be next year. One over a strange rectangular settings of stones, which we'll probably look at next year, which is over the land bridge, and then one within a series of what we think are hut circles within the promontory fort itself. On the right, you can see the corresponding image taken by the Royal Commission, and you can see where our excavation trenches we proposed would go. This is the interpretation done by the Cherish project, which Toby played a big part on with Louise, and interpreted what we were looking at on the site. You've got the ramparts, the ditches, the two banks and ditches cutting off the promontory, which potentially went on a little bit further in the presumed in the Iron Age. You've then got the peculiar square structure or rectangular structure, which we're going to aim to look at next year. And then within the area marked number 8 is where we've got the hut circles themselves. In fact, when we came to look at it, this was initially picked up by some of the drone work that we were doing on site. We were wondering whether you could pick out some earlier ditches in the eroded bit over the land bridge. I'm just wondering whether you can see at the top, there are these really quite clear rock cut, it seems, ditches. And on some of the promontory forts to the north of Buxpool, that's exactly how these features are formed. They are cut down into the solid limestone. And so we're wondering whether that is a section through. I wouldn't want to be cleaning up that section to record it in particular, but maybe next year we'll be able to have a look at the ditch at the top, because the square structure is at the top of that. I went to the site in probably about this time last year just to see how it looked on the ground, and you could see quite a bit of surface expression of features when you walked around. This was, I thought, the most obvious one. It seemed to be 2 circular structures. You can see the sort of round areas here lying next to each other, and we thought that would be a good place to focus on. It was partly excavated in the 1930s. We don't know where. Somewhere at the castle at Buxpool was excavated. There's no plans, no sections. Journal of Celtic Studies has a certain amount of there's a paragraph talking about some field work that went on there, and they found about 10 sherds of Roman pottery, in fact, with some mortaria and a piece of amphora. So there's some Roman material somewhere from this area. I wondered whether this being the most prominent structure you could see on the top of the hillside, it might also be the bit that was excavated in the 30s as being an obvious thing for them to target. So that was one of the reasons why we thought we would do our limited excavation evaluation, I suppose, on this particular part of the site. You'll perhaps recall one of the key things of working with the veterans here on a well-being side of things, that it's a beautiful location. And we certainly provided that. It's dramatic, it's spectacular. You've got chuffs flying around, squawking away. It really is very, very beautiful. And we were very lucky with the weather. I can imagine it was quite emotional otherwise, but in 2 weeks of gorgeous hot August summer, it was really, really spectacular. So from the soul point of view, it ticked that box very, very firmly. Also quite dramatic noises there. You've got the sea coming up through the blowhole. You get all sorts of weird noises. You can get rainbows forming from the sea spray. So it's quite a spiritual location, I felt, as well, while we were doing the work. When we did the field work, we were lucky enough to be supported by the Royal Commission throughout. Here, as you can see, Louise working away with the DGPS, providing us with a really accurate plan of any erosion elements, of any hut circles that were visible, and also our excavation trenches. So this she is working away on it. Actually, there's a bit of land on the other side of it. It's not quite as precipitous as that looks. And we were able to also call upon the commission with Toby flying over the site to give us some air photographs. So you can see again, this is the nature of the blowhole, which is eroding. It's getting bigger, so eventually that will cut off the promontory and we'll not be able to get to some of the elements within it. You can also see the two banks and ditches curving around with a modern radar installation there, but all the archaeological elements really very, very clear. It was a very good year for with the heat for air photography. We're picking up some really quite detailed results. Actually, that was a photo from my phone. It's a very ropey photograph, but that's Toby flying over. So he was actually texting me photographs from the aircraft straight to the ground. So we're getting a strange sort of real-time air photography as we went on. So here's our excavation trench. You can see it looks like the Caribbean, doesn't it, with the weather? Beautiful stuff. Under the triple SI conditions that we're working with, we had to move off all the turfs. You can see this barrow line that's taking off all the turfs to place them over the limestone square structure at the top of the promontory, which we are going to interpret next year, and we had to put all the soil next to it on tarpaulins. But you can see that we're beginning to unearth, as the excavation team, two circular structures within the promontory, becoming a bit clearer here. So there's our barrow line, the square structures down here, and this is the two structures that are beginning to be excavated. Now, we were coming to this with a fair degree of certainty that these are going to be Iron Age roundhouses, and you can also pick out all the darker areas which we thought were going to be other circular potential roundhouses throughout the promontory. So it's a heavily populated and utilized area. All the work done by hand, and the main thing, this was done by Heneb. They were the contracting company that helped us throughout. They led the field work, so led by Fran Murphy and Ken and Jess and other colleagues. They supervised all the veterans and military personnel when they did the field work, and they'll be writing the report as well. So all done by hand in a chain gang, working their way back and learning the joys of trowel clean, and trowel clean is a good thing, and hopefully making discoveries as they went. Now, the curiosity is that we were down onto limestone pretty quickly, but there are curves. It's cut into the bedrock, but augmented in an arc of stones going on top of it. Here's the air photography. Again, that's the one you've just seen. So you can see a very clear curve of a structure with people working within it. And the second one joins it, and it does seem to be linked. It's almost like a figure of eight. So these two structures did have a join in between the two of them. But they made little sense in terms of roundhouses. No post holes. Now that maybe that we just haven't found them yet, and frankly, we haven't bottomed the structure yet. But these are joining together. They are in some quite awkward bits of rocky outcrop that have been gouged into, and then they've built these circular elements on top. Those of you that know Cornwall, I kept thinking about the Menack Theatre as we were working away, because they had these spectacular views from these two circular structures out over the blowhole, where these waves would be coming up, and you'd see the chuffs flying around, and you'd see the those rainbows I mentioned. So it's a spectacular viewing point, but really quite a strange structure. Within them, we were finding elements that indicated that they'd been lived in, but also perhaps they had another focus as well. We were finding areas which had quite a few charred grains. It's not the best of photographs, and I'm not going to guess what these are, whether these are spelt or something, because I know Martin would go mad if I tried to speculate as what this might be, and I think Ruth would as well. My wife is an archaeobotanist. Anyway, there was charred grains within the structure, and there were also little areas where you were getting almost stratified components of shellfish. You were lots of oysters, but limpets as well, and you had the bigger limpets at the bottom, the smaller limpets at the top, and they were in little stratified areas within the structure themselves. So that was a curiosity. You see Toby et al. At the top here. This is the second of the structures which it joins. Again, a limestone base looking out over the sea, but a 2 or 3 course of limestone blocks forming the circular structure. This is the plan that Henneb have put together. So you can see actually the one to the north is clearer. You can see the much more of the circle. This one's seems to be more limestone blocking with a semicircle of laid stones in a layer. Now, I've spoken to Fran and I've spoken to Toby, and we don't all agree on what these things are necessarily. Have they got a votive purpose? Are they a place where you sit and venerate and you visit seasonally and you look out over the blowhole? Are they a place where people lived? Or maybe they're a bit of both. One of the things we did find with this site, however, is looking at the earlier report from the 1930s, they found, I think, just about 10 pieces of pottery, Roman pottery. And it was a bit of an afterthought to put any fine strays into this. We were told pretty confidently, you just don't find pottery and bone on these sites in West Wales. And it was a good job we did put some fine strays in, because we found boxes and boxes of Roman pottery. Lot of black burnished ware, lots of mortaria, no amphora, some fake terra sigillatum, so some reasonably good quality pottery from the site. And both structures had a lot of pottery within it. There were also other small finds. So you've got stone spindle wells. One of the structures in particular had quite a large number of these stone spindle wells, perhaps hinting at much more of a craft origin. But you were getting some quite fine finds as well, and these are some of them. We had this rather fine jet hairpin. There is more of it. There's the lower half of it as well, possibly obviously from Whitby, but a really nice Roman hair accoutrement. There were glass gaming counters and quite a few of these little blue fine glass beads. So this is a site that isn't impoverished in any way. They've got some really quite important material culture within it. The other thing that we found within this, Ken was basically trying to see what veterans is offering, almost mental prizes for any of the veterans that could find a brooch or could find a piece of pot, and a coin was one of his targets. Well, 168 coins were recovered, largely from the southern of the two structures. They're all 3rd and 4th century dates. They're being looked at the moment. About a quarter of them have been examined so far, and of that quarter, all of them were 3rd century in date. Now, I know that's not going to be the final tally, because you can see there's a coin of Constantine in the middle, so there is a 4th century coin as well. But you're getting things like coins of Carausius, the usurper, only the Saxon shore forts from the later part of the 3rd century as well. So we're getting a lot of coinage, which is of reasonable condition, but it's just the fact that there's the sheer quantity, 168 coins, which effectively constitutes, we think, a dispersed hoard. So that's going to have to be declared as treasure, much to the joy, I'm sure, of the the find liaison officer in the National Museum. Anyway, it's all signed over to the museums for keeping later on. But a huge quantity of coins. There were indeed brooches as well that were recovered from the site. This is a very ropey image, I'm sorry to say, but we were getting pottery. We've had a few pots with makers' stamps and names on. So that's a really nice connection. That's the other thing we're really keen on working on these sites with the vets, is having that human connection. And this is connecting people with the site a couple of thousand years ago, and that's something really important. And it's a valuable experience for the vets taking part. Many of whom have never done any archaeology before, never thought they had the opportunity to do this. You can see Alan on the left and Rob on the right with some of the finds they've been making with the pottery, and it's quite the experience. And it's, from me as somebody who's been doing archaeology a while now, it's just lovely to see people getting that discovery thrill that we all got into archaeology, well, mainly for in the first instance, and that learning about our history and heritage, and to see the thrill on finding things and learning about their training areas that they've been on in the past is quite a powerful thing. The other element we had with this is that we started to use the sites as a recovery option for other nations. We've had it before with Poles and with some Germans and American soldiers. This is the first time we worked on our sites with Ukrainians. This is Dmitro, who was a man mountain working with us the first time we see. He's completely indoctrinated in British archaeology with his t-shirt and things like that. But he was, of course, finding things as well. He's in an armored unit in the Ukrainian army, and having done 2 weeks, or 1 week, in fact, working with us, he was then straight back to the front line fighting the Russian army, which is just extraordinary. Just can't imagine. He's also a chaplain with the Ukrainian military, so a very spiritual individual, and he found it quite an important thing. And I think our veterans as well enjoyed it. With that, we always try to build into our archaeological programs the ability to do other cultural things in the evening, and have talks and go and visit the local heritage and archaeological sites. Some of you recognise Thomas there, the archaeologist for the national park, Pembrokeshire National Park. So he gave us a good talk on the archaeology of the national park, which is in the mess at Castlemartin. But we also went out to St Govan's Chapel, absolutely glorious, gorgeous structure that's on the military training area. And Dimitro, our chaplain, gave us some Gregorian chanting from Orthodox perspective, which was a very, very moving experience, but great to see these sorts of things around. You also got rather wonderful ecology at this time of year. So the national park ranger Lynn took us out around, and the seal pups are being born. So you've got these rather extraordinary beasts at the foothills of the promontory fort. So you're building in a whole well-being component into our archaeological examinations. It also has the importance of being able to do something throughout autumn and winter after the excavation works. Catherine in the striped top here is leading a team from the Swansea veterans, who are doing some of the post-excavation work, the vital post-excavation work that never makes the telly, but it is as important as any of the field work. So all these individuals here are Welsh veterans based in Swansea. Some of them fought in the Falklands War, worked on the excavations with us, and now following the whole process through to the finds cleaning, and it'd be great for them to see their results in the write-ups that HENEB are undertaking and will complete after the second years of excavation. So it worked incredibly well. We put about 25 military people through the program over the 2 weeks, and gave HENEB a massive headache with the amount of archaeological post-excavation work they're going to have to do. But the site was incredibly good. If you want to see any more about this, well, it's going to be featuring on Digging for Britain, I believe. So James here in the camouflage is interviewed by the Digging for Britain team, and they'll get their moment in the sun talking about the Castlemartin excavations some point in the spring, I believe. But from a well-being point of view, from an archaeological discovery point of view, fantastic. From a curator's point of view, really useful. We're learning an awful lot more about one particular promontory fort on the tank ranges, and if we can extrapolate that sort of data to the 3 or 4 to the north of this particular site, then that's really interesting, because we thought the Buckspool was likely to be perhaps the less fancy of the lot. Maybe we're completely wrong. The one thing we would say is that every single find we had from this Iron Age promontory fort was Roman. every single find. So maybe if we get into the ditch next year, we'll find some Iron Age material. But yes, at the moment we are looking at 3rd and 4th century material culture, and that is it. So let's move up to the north. Let's go up to Anglesey. Always nice to have a map of the site. And this is a map I love using. This is from the Cadw publication that you can get online, which shows the various monuments in the region. And we're looking at the site of RAF Valley, or selfishly as they put it, Bach. Many of you will know the island really well, but if you don't, it's the main fast jet training area for the British Armed Forces. So they're using these things, the Hawk trainer jets. They fly all sorts of fast jets in the region, but these are the main training thing. And you can see in the bottom left the main runway for RAF Valley, and just to the north of it are these two little bogs. The Lake of the Small Stones, Bach, is this one here. In fact, it was a bog, and the reason for the archaeological excitement here is because of the discovery of what it says here, one of the most important Iron Age assemblages in Britain. This was found in 1942, and it found in 1942 by dint of the Americans coming over to aid the Second World War effort. And what they needed was an extended runway to facilitate the landing of their main bomber aircraft, things like the B-17 bombers. And when the runway was created into the sand dunes at RAF Valley, the sand was flying around from the dunes and getting into the engines of the bombers, which is obviously mechanically a really bad thing to do. Now, a solution was arrived at by groundkeeper of the local golf course, and his suggestion was to dredge the bog of Bach and obtain the peat from that to spread it over the sand, which would facilitate growth of plants, consolidate the sand dunes, and alleviate the problem of the sand blowing everywhere. So that was the logic. It's quite a tricky surface to work on in bogs, I'm sure you all know. And they did get a couple of vehicles stuck in the bogs. In so doing, they also unearthed bits of metal lying around. Some of it was, there was a big old chain, and one of the vehicles that was stuck in the bog was dragged out of the bog by one of the chains that was lying around. Now, the chap responsible for the ground, a chap called William Roberts, he thought that this was quite an unusual looking chain, so he did a drawing for it, sent it to the National Museum in Cardiff, and Cyril Fox replied, it was indeed a very unusual chain. It is an Iron Age slave chain. So over the next year or two, they visited the site and recovered elements from the surface of the ground, and that's what we now know as the Bach order assemblage. It's material from the 1st century BCE and 1st century CE or AD, and related in part to weaponry, to chariots, ceremonial items such as the very famous bronze plaque here with the Triscale design from the Latane style from the Iron Age, absolutely gorgeous piece of design work. And over the period of those years, they recovered about 181 objects from the site. Now, not all of those objects are going to be from the late Iron Age, a very early Roman period. Some of them are probably going to be a little bit more modern, but at least 181 objects. And these are now on display. They're on display at St Fagans in a case there. Some of them are at the National Museum in Wales, but the crucial things are things like the destroyed weaponry, the chariot parts, the bridle bits, the part of the trumpet, which is, I think I'm right in saying, the only one that's been found in Wales. There's one in Scotland as well. This is much more of sort of an Irish design. And then, of course, these two slave chains, which are phenomenal. I couldn't not put in a picture of Druids throwing things into the lake with skulls, still with their mandibles, really nice on the stakes. I think I love this idea of Druids throwing things into the lake. Really phenomenal picture. Now, the reason sort of my team got involved in this is a curatorial one, and the reason for that was that the runways are being modernized, they're being widened, and they're being strengthened at RAF Valley. And within what we call estate development plans, there are always footnotes to consider the archaeology. In fact, it goes into, on some sites, it goes into a great deal of detail on what needs to be done. This one in particular simply said that if you're looking at the widening of runways, you should consider the potential for there being more elements of the Llancarig assemblage spread over the runways from the 1940s. Because remember, in the 1940s, they were just visually looking at what was there. And so the chances that they were going to have missed things. Well, the runway was being widened, and as part of the discussions on this, I sought the permission to come up with a team of Nightingale veterans to undertake metal detecting survey. And let's face it, the only way you're going to find stuff on this really is metal detecting, which is prohibited on the Ministry of Defence estate for perhaps obvious reasons. You don't really want to be metal detecting an artillery impact area, for example. I mean, you could, but you wouldn't do it many times, let's be honest. So we're doing the survey through metal detecting, but looking at areas where peat was spread. And we're fortunate enough to have the map you can see on the right, which is taken from Phil MacDonald's book on the bronzes of the Llancarig assemblage, which shows the peat spread, which has been hashered in on top of the runway. You can see the bright white sand, and the hasher is where the peat was spread on top of it. We've got some really good air photography, in part taken by the Luftwaffe as well. So really good sequence of photographs. So we know where the peat was spread, and that was where we thought we would concentrate on, especially next to the runway redevelopment work that was going on. And the peat, when you come to look at it, is pretty clear. This is a cutting that was already there when we arrived. You can see the natural sand dune, and you can see the depth of peat spread on top of it. So one of the guiding things when we worked on the site was that if you're getting a good metal signal, and we're taking everything out that has got a metal signal, if you've got a peat surround, then that's much more of a likelihood to find bits of the assemblage. It's a beautiful place to be. It can be very bleak, but I think it's a very mystical, for want of a better word. I think it's a very magical area. You can see the runways in the background. That's RAF Valley, and this is Llancarig in the foreground to the runways. Now, we did start off by gridding it all out, maybe a little bit foolhardy. If you've ever been to RAF Valley, or probably Anglesey as a whole, it can be quite windy. So laying out tapes is not always the easiest thing to do. In the end, we worked out that really, as the items are not going to be any sort of context at all, so as long as we kept the metal detectorists in a rough, organised area, then we can GPS in anything they did find without necessarily having them to work in a grid. So we worked at the area at the top of the runway, very close to Llancarig, and found nothing really. This is very close to where the bog is, Llancarig, and so we're working our way through and ticking off areas that we thought weren't going to be quite so likely to retrieve any more of the items. We're looking at the northern area. A lot of the peat was stockpiled before it was spread across the runway, so we thought that might be quite a good area, but that's now got a road going over it, and you're really not going to find anything else. We did find some military finds, and you do get these on the estate. Luckily, nothing was live and life-threatening, even though we would have had the capacity to deal with it had it been the case. But these are quite informative. They do tell you the story of the heritage of RAF Valley, which has its own heritage centre run by Warrant Officer Shanks in the old Anglesey airport. And some of these are, if they only did this in the Iron Age, we'd be laughing. You can get a lot of data. This is made by the Royal Laboratories in Woolwich. It's a Mark 7 303 round in 1938. So you get a lot of data from it, and those that know about their ammunition can tell you things about it. We found a dog tag. That's an American dog tag. You can trace the individual whose tag it is, and he's one of the armourers. He worked in the munitions on the bombers, presumably lost his tag in the 1940s, but telling you about the American presence. So again, it's like those stamps on the Roman pottery we saw at Buxpool. It's a human story, which I think is an important part of the narrative. Again, we have evening talks to keep the people going. This is the very first evening talk we had. This is Toby giving us a talk about the spread of the peat, and of course Llancarig itself, and the role of the Druids and the Roman invasion of Anglesey in 6061 by Suetonius Paulinus. All the kind of good history they're getting with it, and part of the Cherish programme that had been worked on. And by this point, we hadn't actually found anything. However, the next day, it's very clear, and you can see the enthusiasm and excitement when people do find something. This is David, one of our RAF veterans. He made the very first discovery, thought was going to relate to the Llancelliback assemblage. He found a terret ring. And here he is holding the very first find that we made as a project at RAF Valley. So that was a really special moment for us. Within an hour or so, we found another thing. We tend to work over weekends only because that's when the RAF and their colleagues aren't training. So we're able to get onto the airfield without getting in the way of the RAF. So it's a limited, targeted experience when we go up there. We stay in the mess and work over a weekend. This is Graham, another of the RAF vet. Well, he's still serving in the RAF. He's holding a Polden Hills style bridle bit. There you go. So the first of the horse bridle bits that we've recovered at RAF Valley, and it's great when you find something. There's all the vets get together. And you see Emma and James and Brooksy all together, and it's a really good shared camaraderie experience and the excitement of finding something 2,000 years old from a military point of view. From these two, really good. So that's our first year. So we thought, having found 2 items of the assemblage, it was worth going back. The Polden Hills thing, this is very similar to some of the ones from Somerset. It's got this flared element to it, and we think this is 1st century CE. This one actually has some red, it's difficult to see, but red inlaid sort of glass work. So that's the first of that sort of type that's been found on site. So we did go back, but before we went back, we did a bit more of the sort of working over winter and dealing with experts. Some of you will recognize Adam Gwilt at the National Museum on the left, who's showing us some of the other Iron Age finds recently made in Wales, and indeed in Anglesey as well, and telling us about the story of Llancelliback and some of the elements that he's still got in the museum. And then again, the inimitable Professor Mel Giles from the University of Manchester, who's an expert on chariots, and she showed us things like the models made by Cyril Fox on the National Museum in the 1940s with our finds. So that was a really nice thing for our guys to do, and have a trip to see the museum and also to see the items on display at St Fagans. And here you can see some of the finds that were made in the 1940s. We also went up to Oriel Mon, the wonderful, beautiful Oriel Mon Museum, which is where our 2 finds that you've just seen are going to end up, which is lovely, and that'll join their little display of the Llancelliback assemblage. Really important. We felt that the items will stay, well, certainly in Wales, but Oriel Mon in particular. So we have already signed off those 2 items to the National Museum. So they're declared as treasure, but the Ministry of Defence has already signed them away in ownership forms to the National Museum, and they're going to Oriel Mon. We also took a nice little trip to Brookethley D as well, to get as much of a prehistoric experience as we could for our team. But having found those 2, we wanted to go back. We showed them off the National Museum. We actually had Delith joining us, and Delith is the granddaughter of Mr. William Roberts, who found the first items in the 1940s. So it's lovely to have the local and Welsh-speaking continuity story that happens on the island. So we did go back. You can see our first finds actually on Alice's Digging for Britain. I think it's still online, but it's a nice find. It was a good thing to enable us to go back for a second attempt. But we went back mob-handed in the second thing. We brought also magical charms. You can see Toby, you can see Duncan Mackay, you can see Mel here. Actually, we're armed with a Carnix. We thought that would be a good thing. And I understand that the Welsh football team now runs out to the sound of Carnices, which is it's quite something. I don't think they'd want to run out to the sound of the Carnix, as played by Paul, one of our rifles veterans. He gets quite a noise out of it, and it intimidates us, but I'm not sure that's the football has quite got the football tone to it yet. But there we are, a Carnix being played in front of the bog. So our team went back for a second go, and we're joined by the find liaison officer for the region by Adele Bricking. Really important that she was there with us and helping to identify anything that came out of the ground as it went. And again, more finds. So you've got the 2 that we found in 2024, and it's joined by elements from 2025. So this is Brooksy with another of the horse bridle bits, quite small compared to the others. And this curved piece of iron, which James is holding, James is ex-cavalry, so quite nice connection with chariots. Initially, we put that into the back of the van. We're taking all metalwork off site. We GPS where it's from. We put it into the back of the minibus and take it off site so it doesn't snag up the airfield. Adele said, "Who found this?" I showed it to Mel Giles because that is part of an Iron Age chariot tire, believe it or not. And we have now found quite a few of these things. We didn't recognize it first go, hands up, but we now are very adept at recognizing Iron Age chariot tires. So that was the first of them. Beautifully for us, Delith, William's granddaughter, did find a terret herself. So that was a really lovely moment for us, that you got a continuity of family story on the island. And so April this year, as I said, we returned, we found all of these things. So you have chariot tire, you have nave bands, sort of like a hubcap of the chariot, possibly part of a currency bar. 1, 2, 3 horse bridle bits, one of which has got Latin art on, which looks like a little face. 1, 2, 3 turrets, and then you're getting nave bands and possibly curved fittings from shields. So a huge result from our point of view, and again increasing the size of the assemblage and the knowledge. I said 181 pieces before, and you can see already that we're finding more and more bits. So we went back a third time. This is October. This is fresh off the press. This is the first time I've been able to show anybody these images. The coroner has cleared me to let you be the first to see any of these things, because I've signed them off to the National Museum. So first thing we found was this. I thought this was lovely. It's a nice dinky toy truck. And when you think the whole story about how the truck was dragged out of the bog by these chains from Kellyback, I'm presuming it was trucked slightly bigger than this one, but it's quite nice social history of having visits to RAF Valley undertaken in the past by families. And we might even be able to pick out which particular event it was, because we know the date of this truck, we know the dates of the events, and it's something that the Heritage Centre will be able to work on. We did find other military elements. So we've already seen the dog tag, you've seen the ammunition, but this is a medal issued for the Battle of Atlantic to RAF personnel. And this was lost by somebody who's come back in the late 1940s, we presume, and lost somewhere on the airfield. So this is a Second World War medal issued to aircrew. We also moved to a different area. There was a nice flat area next to the runway, which had yielded all the previous finds. So we thought we'd try and explore further areas to see if there were other elements, and therefore there was a wider deposition of finds which had occurred in the 1940s. And so Kelly, one of our serving personnel, went into the tussocky grass that was out on the airfield, and that's a very poor image, I apologise, but you can see there is a bar of iron at the top. And we've got the Cyril Fox publication next to it. It's a currency blade. It's the first complete one we've had on the site. So we've now confirmed that an area that we hadn't explored before was also going to yield items of the assemblage. And they were coming then thick and fast. Here's another turret ring. You can see how close to the surface this thing is. It's just below the grass, and found very, very easily and recovered very easily, GPS'd in and taken off for conservation immediately. This one was really quite a spectacular one. It's got this plastic decoration on, which almost looks like a torque to me. I mean, I'm not an Iron Age finds expert, but to me, this looks very similar to sort of some of the designs you get on things like the Snettisham torque. But it's part of a horse bridle bit, broken. We found nests of turrets. So this is one of the large turrets. You tend to get 5 of these turret rings, which guide the reins on a chariot. The turret is affixed to the yoke of the chariot, and the reins go through the space here. 5 standard on a British chariot, apparently. We found these 3 together in a little nest. They'd probably been put in a bag or something like that when they'd been hoiked out of the bog in the 1940s and then dropped onto the airfield. So really quite special. 2 more turret rings, and these have got little rosette decorations on. These are different ones. It's interesting enough. These are 2 different turrets, but they've been deliberately broken in that sort of killing of an item you get in the late Bronze Age and you get in the Iron Age. It's been deliberately broken, but in the same place. And these are pretty much identical objects with breaks in very, very similar locations. So whether they've all been killed as part of a ritual thrown into the bog at the same stage, don't know. But we are beginning to pick up patterns of material just on the items that we found. This, I mean, a lot of this stuff is really hot for the press, I'm afraid. I couldn't tell you anything more than this. This is a folded piece of copper alloy. We don't think it's modern. We're looking at the XRF on all of these items. I say we, it's Adele that's largely looking at these, I think, and looking at these items to see if they have an old alloying signature. So we're not looking at modern material, but we're retaining everything and ruling out some things and adding some things in. This is possibly a part of the shield fitting. That's the working hypothesis. We found a sword scabbard, really rather lovely. It's got so there's the scabbard completely. If you flip the other side of it, you've got these trumpet decorations, which again, standard Iron Age design. Our first aid for finds was fun. This is in the mess at RAF Valley. So poor Adele is working with Lisa. They're working up to 2 in the morning to make sure they're all bagged up safely, got enough silica gel conserved, make sure that we've double checked that we've got grid references for all of these things, and they're all bagged up, and then they're taken away to the National Museum to be part of another treasure declaration to the coroner. They've already been signed off. Hopefully these will all end up at Oriel Mon in Anglesey. Another interesting thing is that you can see the chap there in the blue shirt. He's an American veteran. He has left the American military now and is now doing an archaeology degree at Cardiff University. So we're managing to recruit a paramilitary wing of British archaeology, which I think is fabulous. And this is the assemblage of finds that we made just in October. Now, the first report done by Cyril Fox in the 1940s talked about the discovery of 3 turrets, 3 chariot turrets in that first grab in the 1940s. In the October trip we went to RAF Valley, we recovered 9. So 3 times in just one weekend. And it just makes you think how much is out there on the airfield. I'm imagining there's going to be well, a huge amount more, and we're going to hopefully more than double the Castlemartin assemblage by the end of all the things. The chap I mentioned to you before just then, JT, the American vet, the thing he really wanted to find was an Iron Age sword, and they're very unlikely to find them. However, not far from the scabbard, he did find an Iron Age sword. So we are getting weaponry, we're getting a lot of accoutrements for a chariot, and we're getting elements from the 1st century BCE through to the 1st century AD. So here's some close-ups of the things. Here's the Iron Age currency blade. These are the horse bridle bits from October, and you can see the beautiful design on that one. These are our 9 turrets. These are the tires that we had in October. So these are all parts of the Iron Age chariot tire. There's fragments of 10 chariot tires. The nave bands, 2 of them from October. And the sword and the scabbard shape. So I like to think that we have found a large proportion of this sort of scene. Rather wonderful Angus McBride illustration. If you think of the Llyn assemblage, you have got a shield boss, you've got swords, you've got scabbards, you've got nave bands, you've got tires, you've got turrets, you've got horse bridle bits, you've got this sort of thing from the late Iron Age into the early Roman period. And it worked from the well-being point of view fabulously. The team are brilliant. They make lots of good discoveries. They made lots of good friends and a huge enthusiasm in archaeology, and in particular in Welsh archaeology. I think that is probably me. So diolch, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Richard. That's absolutely fantastic. Really, really interesting lecture. I have to say, I feel terribly sorry for archaeology students now. When I was a student learning about Llyn Bach, I learnt about every single piece from that hoard. And now think of all these poor archaeology students having to learn so much more than they did do originally. Absolutely extraordinary. And yeah, we look forward to you finding the bones of the horses and the rest of the chariots.
That's really interesting. We're certainly, I mean, as you're well aware, there are animal bones from the original assemblage, and that's something we are looking for. Of course, a metal detector is not going to find them. So we are doing a few bits of test pitting around the area to see if we can find them. And Adele's pretty sure we found a couple of sheep bones last time. So that's going to be the next phase, is to try and find some animal bones.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that would be a really fascinating aspect to it, and I also feel quite sorry for poor old inspectors of ancient monuments because, again, when I used to go around looking at Iron Age promontory forts, there we are. They was wandering around Pembrokeshire looking at Iron Age promontory forts, and now, which never, of course, found any pottery or any coins there, but now you found vast amounts of pottery and vast amounts of coins, and it's all Roman, so they're not Iron Age at all. And so, as my attempt at an unanswerable question, I mean, what are those Romans doing there? And it's not early Roman either. I mean, what are they doing there? And where's the Iron Age? So your next year we'll find the Iron Age, perhaps.
We would love to, yeah. I mean, that's certainly, I think, the hope of the team. I know Toby, I can see Toby. Hello, Toby. That's certainly one of the things we're hoping for, that the ditch will give us some Iron Age elements that will help us enlarge that story. It's a magical area. I think they are living there, but I think there is a votive function to it as well. But what that is, I think it's probably quite early to say.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Right, more questions, please, from people. And don't forget, if you're going to ask a question, don't forget to unmute yourself, otherwise we won't be able to hear it. If Tydia and Toby can help me see people, because I'm only seeing
Yes,
half.
people can type into the chat as well if you're feeling
Yeah.
feeling shy in front of over 70 people tonight at this huge audience. So type in the chat if you have a question as well.
66 going into my machine. Yeah.
Stunned into silence.
Well,
Can I
I'm
ask a
sure.
question?
Yes, please.
I went to the Pembrokeshire Archaeology Day a few weeks back, and they said that on the find at the find in South Pembrokeshire, that measuring spoons had been found. Can anyone say any more about that?
Well, all I know is that there are 3 iron spoons. Yes, they're right. I think it's 3 iron spoons that have been found. And I mean, I know Toby, measuring spoons, certainly from the Iron Age, is one of your things, isn't it? But these things do seem to be Roman. I don't know their significance. Perhaps Toby, I could slope shoulders onto you on that one. Do you?
No, I don't. They're on. Well, it's this news to me actually. I haven't seen Fran's full presentation from Pembrokeshire, so I shall have a quiet catch up this winter about the spoons. But if they're iron spoons from the site, they may be more domestic function. The I think it's 19 pairs of bronze spoons we have from the late Iron Age, the so-called divination spoons, are exceptionally rare. So these may be more prosaic function. But then again, it's a strange old place, Buxball. I half wonder if we've got a domestic altar in one of the little rectangular settings within the rock. So there may be other things going on there. But they may not be the same as the divination spoons we have from the late Iron Age, which are distinctly insular British and pre-Roman. Yeah.
I see. There's a question we've got in the chat from Bird W. I don't want to guess the origin of that. It says, what kind of decoration did you find on these objects? And if we're talking about the objects from Bach, I presume, because that's the ones we did find decorations on. I think one of the really lovely decorations we found on a broken horse bridle bit back in May was it? April. It had what looked like a little emoji face on it, a little stylized face on the bit that would have gone just next to the horse's mouth. So according to Mel Giles, it's a it's a good Latin decoration, and one of the things she said was a possibility that it might form part of an Iron Age joke in some ways, because you read the classical authors and they talk about how the Celts used to hang the severed heads of their enemies from the horse's bridle bits next to the side of the horse's head, and of course the image is of maybe a stylized human head, so it's almost like a jokey head put at the side of where they're going to hang the severed heads. So that's one of the things we found. The other bits of artwork on it, we found, I mentioned the trumpet decoration on the scabbard, and then there's the really fancy decoration on the broken horse bridle bit that we recovered this autumn. Again, it's subject to cleaning, but it is a classic Latin art. I think certainly we're going to find more bits of artwork up there, and it possibly will change our understanding of so-called Celtic art in the region. So those are the elements we've been finding, the Latin art styles, and augmenting what we already have, because you've got the fabulous shield boss and the Triscale design on the plaque or the lunula that's already been discovered in the 1940s. So some really quite impressive artwork being discovered.
Mhm. There has been some rather good artwork from Llanbergoch way in Anglesey. You've got horse bits
Mm.
and also a very attractive little goat or something, which has obviously been the head of some kind of stick or other. And it's a little bit like the rather dull one from the original Llancerrig collections. Yes.
Francis, is that the recent treasure find?
Yes, it is
Yes.
recent treasure finds. I sneak into GAT and draw them.
Oh, wonderful.
I have to swear that I will never take anything out of the out of the building because I like drawing interesting things.
Wonderful.
We have
Another question we've got, Robin. What's the use of currency bars? This is basically the
Uh-huh.
material that from which a lot of the ironwork is made. So these are it's such a process to forge iron that this is effectively, once you've got a bar of well forged iron, you can use it to make the other objects from the Iron Age period. So it's effectively the raw material from which you construct other items, and as such it's quite a valuable item. I can't remember how many were found in the 40s. A few of them. We
There
found
are
just the one.
about 3 or so.
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah, but sadly, Peter Crewe would have been your man to look at those, but alas, he's just died. Yeah.
Oh,
Do we have any more?
Any further questions from anybody? I don't see any. Do speak up if you want to, but I don't see any at the moment. Well, if there aren't any more, then I'm going to lumber Toby Driver with the vote of thanks, because I know he has been part of your
very
project.
important part.
No, very important part. Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Richard. I hope you'll be posting a check as well. Thank you, Sean, and everybody. It's wonderful to see such a big audience for this Christmas lecture, drawn in by the subject and the speaker tonight being so very special. I think it's difficult to fathom how many projects you're currently running, Richard, alongside your day job with the Defence Infrastructure Organisation. Not just these 2 recently initiated in Wales. I mean, you're working on downed aircraft, you're working on prehistoric landscapes in Salisbury Plain. You've been working with veterans in the past, rebuilding houses at Butser Ancient Farm. And all this is often, I think, galvanized solely by you. I know you've got a good team behind you. But I know particularly things like Llancerrig Bach would not have been initiated without your insight to push on the planning restrictions on RAF Valley, to think, well, perhaps this is a year we could do something and drive forward with it. And I know with it also sites like Buckspool, which have, I have to say, flipped an enormous amount of things on their head for South Wales and Pembrokeshire. I think it's the largest collection of Roman material from any site in Pembrokeshire at the moment, which is quite extraordinary. And again, it's been a long process to get that dig to happen. Again, probably a lot of late nights by yourself after work, writing letters, doing the SSI consent, the scheduled monument consent, getting some funding in, all this. So I think we have to pay credit tonight for you, not only the work you're doing in England and Wales for the Defence Estates, but the work you're doing for Welsh archaeology. I think it's also, I've just come to these projects in the last couple of years, and it's pretty sobering, I think, working with both acting personnel who've had a tremendously difficult time of things that I could not even fathom, and also veterans as well, military veterans. And I know you're mental health first aider in your work on the dig. So at the end of the day, when the projects finish and the evening tours are finished from in the bar, you're then there if people need you to talk to and to let off steam. And this is all being juggled behind the scenes of the actual project. So I think we raise a glass to you this Christmas for the work you're doing there. Not to embarrass you, but the book everybody needs to read if you're taking this any further. This is obviously coming out backwards. This is Broken Pots Mending Lives, the Archaeology of Operation Nightingale, published by Oxbow in 2023 to great acclaim, forward by Professor Alice Roberts as well, featuring the incredible photography of Harvey Mills and all the work of your great veterans and the Operation Nightingale team. So I think we ought to join to thank you tonight for an absolutely splendid lecture, and wish you a very happy Christmas period as well, where you can relax from all the work you've been doing. So thank you. Cheers.
Okay.
Yep, thank you very, very much indeed,
Thank
Richard.
you all.
It's very, very, very good to meet you and to see this fantastic contribution you're making to archaeology in Wales. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you everybody for coming and supporting this, and have a very happy Christmas. It is a Christmas lecture. It seems a bit early, but nonetheless, happy Christmas to everybody. Thank you very much indeed.